A human warship appeared without warning. The Galactic Empire misjudged humanity. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Hayes. His gaze fixed on the radar screen of the command center of the Resolute, the Galactic Empire's flagship. The ship was one of the most advanced in the galaxy, its weapons and technology far surpassing anything any race had ever built. The Empire had stood unchallenged for centuries, ruling over planets and systems with an iron fist. No one dared to oppose them. Hayes had seen it all, countless battles, countless victories. The Empire's fleet was feared across the galaxy. Their ships were fast, powerful, and nearly indestructible. As he stared at the screen, the hum of the Resolute's engines and the soft sounds of the crew working were the only noises in the room. But today, something was different. A small dot appeared on the radar, a tiny, almost insignificant speck among the vast emptiness of space. At first, the crew thought it was nothing, just an error, maybe a malfunction in the radar systems, but Hayes wasn't so sure. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes as he studied the dot. It didn't seem like anything the Empire had encountered before, and it was coming closer. "Lieutenant, are we sure it's nothing?" Hayes asked, his voice steady, though his curiosity had peaked. The officer at the console looked back at him, her face a mask of confusion. "I'm not sure, sir. The radar shows a small object, but it's not registered under any known ships or readings. We don't have anything like it in our databases." Hayes stood up and walked to the console. "Could it be an enemy ship?" he asked. The thought was almost laughable. No one dared challenge the might of the Empire. The idea of an enemy warship showing up without warning was something out of a bad story. "It's too small, Colonel. No weapons, no signature," the officer replied. Hayes wasn't convinced. Something didn't feel right. He ordered the ship's sensors to scan more closely. For a moment, the dot on the screen grew slightly bigger, but it wasn't what Hayes expected. The object wasn't showing up as a regular ship. Instead, it was just there, a presence in space. A ship without any trace of the Empire's familiar technology. "Get me a full scan of that object now," Hayes ordered. The crew scrambled, working quickly to understand the strange sight before them. For several tense minutes, the object continued to close in, as if moving purposefully toward the Resolute. The quiet hum of the command center made the tension all the more palpable. Hayes looked around at his crew. They were all waiting, hoping for answers that didn't come. Then, suddenly, the object grew larger on the radar. It was impossible. Something so small was now appearing far closer than it should have been, and without any sign of propulsion or engines. No ship could move through space this fast without being detected by the Empire systems. "Sir, it's not showing any typical movement," the officer said. "It seems to be warping space around it. We can't track it properly." Hayes didn't know what to make of this. Nothing made sense. How could a ship just appear like this, moving through space with no visible means of propulsion? Then the ship made its move. Without warning, the object blazed with light, a brilliant, almost blinding burst of energy. Hayes felt a chill run down his spine as the ship disappeared from the radar. One moment it was there, the next it was gone. It was as if the object had melted away into the fabric of space. The crew gasped. It was unheard of. No ship, not even the most advanced warships in the Empire, could move like that. "Where did it go?" Hayes demanded, his voice rising. Before anyone could answer, an alert rang through the command center. The radar flickered back to life, but now the object was only a few thousand kilometers away, too close for comfort. Hayes's mind raced. The ship had appeared and disappeared faster than he could process. Was this some kind of trick, a test from another species, or worse? "An attack, red alert," Hayes shouted. "Get me the Empire fleet on the line now. I want every ship in the system to prepare for battle." But it was too late. As soon as the order was given, a massive explosion rocked the Resolute. The shockwave sent the crew stumbling, and alarms blared across the command center. "Sir, shields are down by 30%. We've taken heavy damage to the port side," another officer called out. Hayes's heart pounded in his chest. How was this possible? No ship, not even the mightiest warship in the Empire, should have been able to cause this much damage without warning. The explosion had come from the same unknown ship. It was as though the Vanguard, as the humans would later call it, had breached their defenses with ease. "We're under attack," Hayes said, gripping the console to steady himself. "All hands brace for impact." The crew scrambled into action, trying to assess the damage and prepare the ship for combat. The suddenness of it all was overwhelming. The Resolute was built to withstand the most powerful blows, but this attack had shaken the ship to its core, and it was just the beginning. "Sir, we've lost contact with our outer defenses," an officer said. "The unknown ship. It's turning its weapons on us." Hayes gritted his teeth. The ship was relentless. Every move the Vanguard made felt like it was designed to exploit their weaknesses. The Resolute, despite all its might, was no match for the cunning and speed of the unknown ship. "Launch the fighter squadron," Hayes ordered. "We need to defend ourselves and find out who is behind this." His voice carried through the chaos of the command center. The fighter squadron was launched, their ships cutting through space to face off against the mysterious warship. But as soon as the fighters were deployed, they found themselves under fire. The Vanguard was too fast, too efficient. It was picking them off one by one like a predator hunting its prey. "We've lost all fighters, sir." "They're down one by one," the officer reported, panic creeping into her voice. "Impossible," Hayes hissed. "Who are they? What do they want?" He couldn't answer that question, but as he looked at the radar once more, one thing became clear. They were facing something completely new, something the Empire had never encountered. A warship, unlike any ship they had ever seen before. Then the ship's weapons fired again, this time straight at the heart of the Resolute. The ship groaned under the impact, shuddering as if it might fall apart. Hayes gripped the console harder, trying to hold on to his composure. He could hear the crew shouting orders, but it felt like everything was slipping out of control. The power was fading, the lights flickering. "Full power to the shields," Hayes shouted. "Prepare the counterstrike, get us out of here." But before he could issue another command, the unknown ship did something unimaginable. It reappeared once more, right in front of them. The Resolute was now face to face with the mysterious warship. The human ship didn't appear threatening, not in the way the Empire's fleets did. But the calmness of the ship's appearance only made it more intimidating. Its smooth surface gleamed in the dim light of the battle, and its sleek design seemed almost alien. The enemy was waiting, watching. Hayes stood there for a moment, his mind racing with possibilities. Who were they? Where did they come from? And most importantly, how had they outmaneuvered the Empire so easily? "I want every gun online." "We're not backing down from this fight," Hayes ordered. But just as the Resolute readied its weapons, another transmission cut through the chaos. It was a broadcast from the mysterious ship. A human voice came through the speakers, calm and steady, like the stillness before a storm. "This is Captain Sarah Lewis of the human warship Vanguard. You have misjudged humanity," she said, her voice carrying a strength Hayes could feel even through the speakers. "We are not what you thought us to be. You've made a grave mistake in underestimating us." Hayes's blood ran cold. He had no idea what this meant, but one thing was certain: this was no ordinary battle. The Empire had misjudged humanity, and now they would pay the price. Captain Sarah Lewis stood in the command center of the Vanguard, looking calm and collected as the battle unfolded before her. Her crew worked tirelessly at their stations, following her orders with precision. They had trained for moments like this, moments when everything was on the line, moments when they had to fight to survive. But what Sarah couldn't shake off was the feeling that this battle was not just about survival. It was about proving something to the galaxy. The Empire had underestimated humanity. They thought of humans as weak, as primitive. They believed that their advanced technology and vast fleet would easily crush any opponent. But Sarah knew that the true strength of humanity was not in the ships they built or the weapons they wielded. It was in their will to fight, to adapt, and to never give up. "Captain," said Lieutenant Jake Matthews, her second in command, his voice filled with urgency. "The Empire is retaliating. They've launched another wave of fighters." Sarah nodded, her eyes fixed on the battle outside. The Resolute was a massive ship, much larger than the Vanguard. But Sarah's warship was faster, more agile, and had a crew that understood the importance of strategy. It wasn't about brute strength, it was about using what they had to its fullest potential. "Activate the EMP cannons," Sarah ordered. "We'll disable their fighters before they get too close." The Vanguard's EMP cannons hummed to life, sending out waves of electromagnetic energy. The enemy fighters didn't stand a chance. The moment the EMP blast hit, their engines sputtered and died, sending the ships tumbling out of control. The Empire's pilots, skilled as they were, couldn't do anything to stop the sudden loss of power. The Vanguard's technology was too advanced. The Resolute was a different story. Its weapons were much stronger than anything the Vanguard had, and it was not going down without a fight. The Empire's flagship unleashed a barrage of laser fire, the beams cutting through the darkness of space. But Sarah had expected this. She wasn't about to let the Resolute take another shot at them. "Turn us to port," she commanded. "Full speed ahead. Let's make sure they can't get a clean shot." The Vanguard swerved quickly, narrowly avoiding the deadly beams of energy. Sarah's heart raced as she watched the laser fire streak past them. She had no time to feel fear. There was no room for hesitation. Every decision had to be made with precision. The crew responded immediately, following Sarah's commands without question. They had worked together for years, and each one knew their role. They didn't need to speak. Every move was instinctual. "Captain, they've locked onto our rear shields," Lieutenant Matthews called out. "Deploy countermeasures," Sarah ordered. "Now." The ship's automated systems activated, releasing a cloud of decoy signals that confused the Empire's targeting systems. For a moment, it looked as though the Vanguard would escape unscathed. But the Empire's ships were relentless. They didn't give up easily. "Fire at will," Sarah said calmly, her fingers tightening around the controls. "Show them what humanity is capable of." The Vanguard returned fire, unleashing a series of powerful blasts from its forward cannons. The Empire's flagship took a direct hit, the explosion sending a shockwave that rattled the Vanguard. The ship's shields flared brightly as they absorbed the impact, but they held firm. For a moment, it seemed as though the Empire might be getting the upper hand. But Sarah wasn't worried. She had a plan. She had always had a plan. "Prepare for Phase 2, Sarah said, her voice steady. "This is where it gets interesting." The crew exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. It was a tactic they had used only once before, but it had proven successful then. They had no choice now but to trust in it once more. "Activate the gravity well generator," Sarah commanded. The gravity well generator was an experimental piece of technology, one that could create a temporary gravitational field capable of pulling ships off course. The Vanguard's engines powered up, and within moments, a massive gravitational pull began to warp space around them. The Empire's ships caught in the field began to drift toward the Vanguard, their course thrown off as they tried to escape the powerful force. "Now," Sarah shouted, "focus fire on the Resolute's engines." The crew responded instantly, targeting the Resolute's weak points. Their weapons hit with precision, damaging the Empire flagship's engines. The ship's movement slowed, its once graceful turns becoming sluggish. The Vanguard had gained the upper hand, but the battle was far from over. The Resolute wasn't just going to give up. It fired again, the impact shaking the Vanguard to its core. Sarah could feel the rumble of the blast deep within the ship. She knew they were on borrowed time. They couldn't keep this up forever. "We need to finish this," Sarah said, her voice firm. "Now's our chance." "Get ready for the final strike." The crew braced themselves, each one focusing on their tasks. The Vanguard began to circle around the Resolute, staying out of its firing range while closing in on its vulnerable side. "Target their command center," Sarah instructed. "We take down their leadership and the rest will fall." With a steady hand, she aimed the ship's weapons at the Resolute's command center, the heart of the Empire's operations. A few well-placed shots and the Resolute would be crippled. It was a risky move, but it was their only option. The Empire's flagship had too much firepower, and they couldn't afford to keep playing defense. "Firing now," Lieutenant Matthews shouted. The Vanguard unleashed its final barrage, the shots hitting their target dead-on. The Resolute's shields flickered as the first impact hit, then shattered with the second. The ship's command center was exposed, and the Vanguard fired again, sending an explosion ripping through the heart of the Resolute. The blast sent shockwaves throughout the Resolute, causing its hull to groan under the strain. The Empire's flagship was no longer the formidable force it had been moments ago. The Vanguard had done it. For a moment, the battlefield went silent. Sarah let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, but it was not over yet. "Report," Sarah barked, her voice sharp. "Sir, the Resolute is disabled," an officer said, his voice filled with disbelief. "Their engines are failing. We've cut their command center off from the rest of the ship." Sarah nodded, her eyes hardening. This was their victory. The battle had been long, but humanity had proven their strength, their ingenuity, and their resolve. The Empire had thought them weak, but now they would see just how wrong they were. "Do we have contact with the Empire?" Sarah asked. "We're picking up a transmission," the officer replied. "It's coming from the Resolute." "Patch it through," Sarah said. The screen flickered and a voice came through, weak and strained. It was from the Resolute's commander, Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Hayes. "You're human," Hayes said, his voice shaking with disbelief. We thought you were just a myth." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "We are no myth," she said coldly, "and now the Empire will understand just how wrong they were about humanity." With that, Sarah ended the transmission and turned to her crew. "Prepare for our next move. We've won the battle, but this war is far from over." The battle had turned in humanity's favor, but the war was far from over. Captain Sarah Lewis stood at the command center of the Vanguard, staring at the view of the shattered Empire flagship, the Resolute, drifting in space. The once mighty warship now looked weak and vulnerable. Sarah knew the Empire would not give up easily. They never did. But they had underestimated humanity, and it was time to make them understand just how wrong they were. "Captain, the Empire has begun transmitting again," Lieutenant Jake Matthews said, breaking the silence. "It seems they're requesting a ceasefire." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "A ceasefire after everything they've done? They must be desperate." "Yes, ma'am." "They're offering to negotiate terms," Matthews replied. "They say if we spare them, they'll allow us safe passage through their territory. They even suggest joining forces to fight against other enemies." Sarah's fingers tightened on the armrests of her chair. The audacity of the Empire was incredible. They had thought they could crush humanity with no resistance. Now that they had tasted defeat, they wanted to strike deals. "Put the transmission through," she ordered. "Let's hear what they have to say." A moment later, the screen in front of her flickered to life, showing the pale, strained face of Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Hayes. His eyes were tired, his posture slumped. The once confident officer now appeared defeated, as though the weight of the battle had taken a toll on him. "Captain Lewis," Hayes began, his voice hoarse, "I won't pretend that we're not in a difficult position. The Resolute is damaged, and we've lost much of our fleet. We misjudged you. Humanity is not what we thought it was. We were wrong. We request a ceasefire. We can negotiate a way forward, a peaceful solution." Sarah watched him carefully, her gaze steady and unwavering. She had no sympathy for the Empire. They had caused untold suffering across the galaxy, and now that they were on the brink of defeat, they wanted to negotiate their way out of it. "And what do you expect in return?" Sarah asked coldly. "We will give you safe passage through the galaxy," Hayes said. "We can offer you access to resources, technology, and—" "Stop," Sarah interrupted. "You think I would trust you after everything you've done? You want us to simply let you off the hook for your actions?" Hayes looked down, clearly ashamed. "No, Captain, I understand. But we're not asking for forgiveness. We're asking for a chance to rebuild. The Empire, it's not the same anymore. We've been humbled." Sarah considered his words carefully. She knew that the Empire was in a weakened state, but she also knew that it had a long history of manipulation and deceit. If they had lost so much already, there was no reason to think they wouldn't try to rebuild and return to their old ways once they recovered. "Your request for a ceasefire is denied," Sarah said firmly. "Humanity doesn't forget the pain you've caused. You will face justice for your actions." Hayes's face fell. "You would destroy us completely then, even after we surrendered." "We didn't start this war, Colonel," Sarah replied, her voice resolute. "You did. You underestimated us, and now you will have to deal with the consequences. We're not here for your negotiations. We're here to make sure that you never threaten the galaxy again." For a moment there was silence. Then Hayes spoke, his voice heavy with regret. "Then we will fight until the end. We won't surrender again." "We'll see about that," Sarah said, "but it's clear now that you're outmatched. The Vanguard has shown you the true strength of humanity." She ended the transmission and turned to her crew. "Prepare to continue our assault. We won't stop until the Empire is completely defeated." As the crew of the Vanguard worked to carry out Sarah's orders, she couldn't help but feel a weight on her chest. The battle had been won, but the war was just beginning. There were still many Empire forces scattered across the galaxy, and the damage they had caused over the years couldn't be undone in a single battle. But they had taken the first step. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it was not to be underestimated. The crew worked seamlessly, their movements swift and sure as they carried out Sarah's commands. The Vanguard was ready for the next phase of their mission, taking down the rest of the Empire's forces and ensuring that no one would ever forget how humanity had turned the tide of war. "Captain, we've identified several remaining fleet clusters," Lieutenant Matthews reported. They're scattered throughout the galaxy, but they seem to be organizing in small groups. We have the advantage of speed, so we can strike quickly and decisively. Sarah nodded. Good, let's take them one by one. Don't give them time to regroup. We're going to show the galaxy that humanity can stand up to the Empire and win. The crew moved quickly, preparing the Vanguard for its next mission. Sarah watched as the ship's weapon systems powered up, the hum of the energy coursing through the ship like the heartbeat of a predator ready to strike. We'll make this count, Sarah said quietly to herself. We'll make sure the Empire never rises again. The Vanguard streaked through space, moving swiftly from one battle to the next. Over the course of several days, Sarah and her crew wiped out several remaining Empire fleets. The once mighty Empire was now on the brink of total collapse. Their ships were no match for the speed, precision, and firepower of humanity's warship. The galaxy was beginning to change. The power that the Empire had held over countless star systems was being dismantled, piece by piece. The people who had lived in fear under the Empire's rule were starting to see a glimmer of hope. They had been told for so long that they were weak, that they were nothing compared to the great Empire. Now they were learning the truth, that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. We're almost there, Matthews said one day as they prepared for their final strike against the last of the Empire's strongholds. After this, the Empire will be finished. Sarah looked out at the stars, the weight of their mission pressing on her. She had led her crew through countless battles, and they had all been willing to fight for a better future. But the cost of war was high. She had seen friends lost, seen the damage the Empire had caused, and seen the faces of those who had suffered under their rule. This is for them, Sarah said softly, for the ones who couldn't fight, for the ones who never had a chance. The final battle was fierce. The last remnants of the Empire's fleet had gathered in a distant sector, hoping to make one last stand. But they were no match for the Vanguard. With a precise strike, Sarah and her crew disabled the Empire's remaining ships, ensuring that they could never pose a threat again. The Empire had been crushed, its leadership scattered and broken. The war was over. As Sarah stood in the command center, looking out at the stars, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The galaxy was no longer under the thumb of the Empire. Humanity had shown that it could fight and win, that it could stand against even the most powerful forces in the galaxy. We did it, Matthews said quietly, a rare smile on his face. Sarah turned to him and smiled. Yes, we did. The victory over the Galactic Empire had come at a great cost. The Vanguard's crew had fought hard, sacrificing much to bring down an empire that had once seemed untouchable. But as the battle dust settled, Captain Sarah Lewis knew that the end of the war was just the beginning of a new chapter. Humanity had proven its strength, but now it had to rebuild not just its people, but the galaxy itself. Sarah stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, her eyes scanning the vast expanse of space. The stars twinkled like distant hopes, their light a reminder that there was more to fight for. The Vanguard had completed its mission, but Sarah wasn't done yet. There were still survivors of the Empire scattered across the galaxy, and as much as they were beaten, they would not easily surrender. Some would fight until the very end, unwilling to accept the reality that their empire had crumbled. Captain, the remaining Imperial fleets have surrendered, Lieutenant Jake Matthews reported. We've received a transmission from the last command center. They're asking for terms. Sarah felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her. She had known this moment would come. The Empire wasn't going to give up without a fight, even if they had no real chance of winning. Now they were offering peace, but it wasn't peace on their terms, it was on humanity's. Put it through, Sarah said, her voice steady. Let's hear what they have to say. The screen flickered, and the face of Lieutenant Colonel Ethan Hayes appeared once again. His expression was different this time, softer, almost defeated. He had come to understand the truth. Humanity was not weak. And now, with the last remnants of the Empire standing before them, he seemed to know it was over. The battle had been lost, but there was still some pride in the way he held himself. It was clear he had accepted their defeat. Captain Lewis, Hayes began, his voice quieter than before. We have nothing left to fight with. The Empire is gone. You've taken down every fleet, every ship. We surrender. But I ask for one thing. Please allow us to leave the galaxy in peace. Let us find new places to rebuild. We don't want to fight anymore. Sarah listened carefully, her eyes hard but not unfeeling. She understood the weight of his words. The Empire's fall was not just the fall of a government. It was the fall of thousands of people, many of whom had been caught up in the machinery of war. They had fought for power, but now they wanted to be left alone to rebuild their lives. "You want peace?" Sarah asked, her voice firm but thoughtful. "You had your chance for peace. You chose war. You invaded, destroyed, and subjugated entire worlds. You made your enemies, and now those enemies have risen. You may surrender, but that doesn't mean you are free of the consequences of your actions." Hayes didn't reply immediately. Instead, he seemed to gather his thoughts, and when he spoke again, his voice was calm. "I know, and I accept that. I've seen the way your people fight, the way you believe in your cause. I don't ask for forgiveness, Captain. I don't think we deserve it. But I ask for mercy. For the soldiers who never had a choice. For the civilians caught in the crossfire. If we leave, we won't threaten your people again. We'll be gone, and you'll never hear from us again." Sarah could feel the weight of the words. They weren't just the words of a man who had lost. It was the plea of a leader who had witnessed the consequences of his actions and understood the cost of war. There was sincerity in his voice, but Sarah knew that the damage had already been done. Too many lives had been destroyed, too many worlds lost to the Empire's greed. She could not afford to show mercy, not yet. "I can't make that promise," Sarah said, her tone resolute. "Your Empire has caused too much pain. You've taken too much. The galaxy won't forgive you that easily. But I will give you something. I'll allow you to leave. But you will leave as exiles, not as conquerors. The galaxy doesn't need another empire. It needs peace. Real peace. And it will take years for us to rebuild what you've destroyed." There was a long silence before Hayes spoke again. This time his voice was quieter, tinged with a sense of finality. "I understand. We'll go. We won't cause trouble again. You have my word." Sarah nodded. "Good. Then you're free to go, but understand this. We'll be watching. If you break your word, if you ever come back to threaten us again, we will stop you. This is your last chance." Hayes bowed his head, a gesture of respect. "Thank you, Captain. We'll leave immediately." The transmission ended and the screen went dark. Sarah exhaled, feeling the weight of the decision she had just made. It was a hard choice. She had given them mercy, but it didn't come without conditions. They had to prove that they were truly done, that they had learned from their mistakes. But she knew there was no guarantee. Some might try to return, some might resist, but that was a risk they had to take. "Captain," Matthews said, breaking her thoughts, "the Empire's fleets are withdrawing. They're heading to the outer reaches beyond the edge of our systems." "Good," Sarah replied. "Let them go. We'll keep an eye on them, but we've done what we came to do. We've made our mark. Humanity has shown the galaxy what it can do. Now it's time to rebuild." As the vanguard turned away from the remnants of the Empire's once great fleet, Sarah's mind raced. The battle was over, but there was still much to do. The galaxy was in ruins. Entire planets had been ravaged by war. The Empire had taken its toll on countless lives, but humanity had survived. And now humanity would lead the way toward healing. "We've done it," Matthew said quietly, his voice filled with awe. "We've taken down an empire. We've changed the galaxy." Sarah nodded, but her expression was serious. "We've won, but the work is just beginning. There's a lot of rebuilding to do, and we're not alone. There are countless others who have suffered under the Empire's rule. We need to help them, show them that the galaxy can be different." The crew of the Vanguard had grown close over the course of the war. They had been through so much together, and now they had a shared purpose: to help rebuild the galaxy and ensure that no one ever again would underestimate humanity. They had proven that even in the face of overwhelming odds, humanity could stand tall. Now it was time to make sure that the galaxy understood the true meaning of peace and justice. "We'll help rebuild," Sarah said, her voice resolute. "But we'll also make sure that the people who suffered under the Empire have a voice. We've shown the galaxy our strength. Now it's time to show them our compassion." Months passed, and the galaxy began to heal. The Vanguard and its crew worked tirelessly, not only to ensure that the Empire's remnants were kept in check, but to help the planets and people who had suffered the most during the long war. Humanity's role in the galaxy had changed. No longer seen as a weak, insignificant species, humanity was now a symbol of hope. Their strength, resilience, and willingness to fight for justice had won the respect of countless races. The Empire's influence was gone, its people scattered and broken. And with it, humanity had secured its place in the galaxy, not through conquest, but through the simple truth that when humanity was pushed to the edge, it could rise and fight, not just for itself, but for the future of the galaxy. And as Sarah stood at the window of the Vanguard, gazing out at the stars, she knew that the fight wasn't over. There would always be challenges, always enemies to face. But for the first time in a long while, there was hope. Humanity had shown the galaxy that it was not to be underestimated, and that was something no empire could ever take away.